All right. What's up, boys? What's up? I wanted to start the stream with a VOD review of Mad vs. Koi. Go in depth. I actually think that Mad was playing pretty well in general. Like this week, I was pretty impressed. The players that I was most impressed with, like, okay, so if I were to rate the players by like performance, like the new players, Elyoya, we all know Elyoya is good as fuck. No one ever denied that Elyoya is good as fuck, right? Out of the new players, I think Alvaro and Merwin played really well, but they were expected to kind of play well. Like these guys had a lot of hype coming in. And Alvaro has just been like one of the best supports in EUS and solo queue for a while, and he played well in competitive, had good results in EU Masters as well. So everyone thinks this guy is a beast. Merwin is kind of known as like a cheese player. Like the things that I've heard about him, like I saw him play a little bit because he played with Jack Spectra on Heretics Academy and like Iberian Cup. I watched a little bit of that, and the thing that struck me about him was like his weird picks. He seems like he's BB light. That's kind of how I was viewing him. Was he's the guy that will play kind of everything top lane. He's willing to play obviously Akali in this game, but he also was known for playing Ahri top. LeBlanc is being banned versus team, not because they think Frescowy is so good at it. It's because Frescowy can play it and Merwin can also play it, so it has like value as a flex for them. And he also just plays like a bunch of carries. He plays tanks, pretty much plays everything. So I think that this guy is really solid. I think Alvaro is super solid. The person that I was the two people that I was most worried about were Frescowy and Supa. I think Frescowy probably was the worst performer over the course of the games for Matt. I think they all performed pretty decently, but I think that he definitely had some like pretty sus games. The Gragas game I thought was not great. I thought he just got outclassed pretty hard by Niski. And Supa, I think, actually performed better than expected. Like I thought this guy would struggle. I think that there was points where he struggled, but for the most part, he was solid. So yeah, let's see what happened. Okay, so let's talk about draft here. So draft is pretty interesting. Now, the order of the bans was actually like a Nocturne ban first. But the Nocturne ban ends up having a ton of value here because if you're willing to play things like Ashe support, then you could end up in lanes with like, for example, if you're going Ashe first pick, you could end up playing Ashe Varus. You could end up playing Ashe Caitlyn. You could end up playing Ashe with Renata support, and you're playing just a lot of things that are double ranged that is really susceptible to Nocturne. I assume that K-Corp was able to deduce that Lucian would most likely be banned. Upset played it in the first two games, and it's always been one of Upset's like best champions. If you remember the Fnatic days with like Lucian, Nami being one of their core picks, it's just something that Upset plays better than pretty much everyone else in Europe. I don't know who else would be considered like a top tier Lucian in EU. I know people say Hansama. I think Upset is better when it comes to playing like Lucian, Nami. AD bans actually make a lot of sense here. Okay, so first ban Nocturne, then you also go for a Rumble ban. I mean, Rumble is good into most of Cabo's champion pool. If you think that Cabo is like kind of like a weak side tank player, that's what he's been. Like he played Gragas, Malphite, then he played a Jax game. It didn't look good. Even the carry picks that he plays a little bit of Olaf. He plays Renekton. I know that. He doesn't really play anything that's like a counter to Rumble. Rumble has very few counters, but a couple that people are willing to play. Udyr top. That's something that people like playing into Rumble. Another thing that you can do into Rumble now is you can actually just draft a pure tank because of the fact that Rumble doesn't have the ability to get through some of the new tank items. Rukern, the Kanaic Rukern, that item seems really fucking good into Rumble. It's very hard for him to like break through the shield consistently. Even if he does, you just back off, and it's just very hard to get through those types of items. Yeah, and then you also just have better items in general. You have like MR Sunfire. So before, when you were playing a tank into a Rumble, you pretty much couldn't go Sunfire. Now you have the ability to actually go one of the Sunfire items. So I think Rumble just has less value into tanks than it used to. The other options into Rumble would be like Aurelia. So some people play Aurelia with Exhaust. It's like a solo queue counter, but pro players actually do play Aurelia with Exhaust in solo queue against Rumble. Bin was playing it a lot, which was speculated that he was going to play it at Worlds if he played into Rumble, but it never ended up happening. There are a few things you can play into Rumble, but a lot of people, instead of having to like either learn Udyr top or play Aurelia with Exhaust and then have to play a competitive game without teleport or play a tank matchup, which is kind of bad early. A lot of people would rather just ban the Rumble. Kalista ban. So they're banning out aggressive ADs for Upset. So they're protecting Supa by banning out aggressive ADs right here. Lucian, Kalista, probably two of the most aggressive AD carries in the game. Upset is not known as a Draven player. He's played it in competitive, but he's not known as a huge Draven player. So you don't really have to fear his Draven the same way you have to fear Hans' Draven or something like that. And then the last ban here is the Varus ban. So the Varus ban is a pretty good ban in general because Varus is just such a flexible first pick. When there's a lot of bans like this, there's not that many Giga OPs up B1, then you can normally just pick Varus, and Varus will almost never be terrible for the game. Like you'll be able to either go poke build into some comps if they have like things that you can't hit. If they have a lot of tanks, you can go on hit. You can go blade Ginsus. There's just so many builds you can do on Varus that actually allow the champion to thrive. Also, the item changes I think were kind of good for Varus anyway. When you think about these lethality changes, people always think assassins, but Varus is one of the best lethality users already. So yeah, champion is just pretty fucking strong right now. All right, so this lines up into the first pick Ashe. I actually really like first pick Ashe. When there's a lot of AD bans, has two purposes. Number one, it soft counters enchanter supports. You don't really want to play something like Lulu into Ashe. And then also it's a flex AD carry pick. So when there's a lot of AD carry bans, it allows you to pick the Ashe early, then not pick your AD support 2-3. So you can go Ashe early, then you don't have to pick AD or support. You don't have to pair it with anything 2-3, because worst case comes to worst, if they ban out other AD carries and they like are really committing that Ashe is a support pick, which a lot of times it is, you just flex it to AD carry and it's completely viable and fine AD carry on the patch. Aphelios answer is fine, and then they go Neeko. So I thought the Neeko was interesting. I think the Neeko pick can be strong, but personally I would rather play with Azir most of the time. I mean, to be honest, I just don't think Neeko players in Europe are very good. I don't think they've ever been very good when you compare it to like the top tier Neeko players around the world. So you had like Faker, who was really good at it. You had Knight, who was really good at it at points. They just are able to do way more with the champion than you see in EU. Even like Caps had a horrible Neeko game this weekend. There's just a lot of like really in moments you see from Neeko players in the West. And it's one of those things that I think is just harder for teams to play out in Western League, because you have to understand engage angles, engage timings. You know, if we go through the history of LEC, we go through the history of LCS, what are the comps that are most successful? It's always like tank top, something like control mage, Orianna, something like that, mid, Orianna, Azir, Corki, who functions as a control mage, mid, plus like hyper scaling AD carry. That's normally the recipe for how you win in the West. It doesn't mean that that's all you have to draft. It's just that is what works the best over time. Azir picked here. I mean, I think 1, 2, 3 is really good for KC here. I think that these three make a lot of sense. So you have Azir versus Neeko. You got Sokken's Azir. It's one of his best champions. You have Xin Zhao, considered probably the strongest jungler on the entire patch. And then you're playing Xin Zhao into like a ranged AD carry that auto attack. It's very hard for Aphelios to actually deal with the Xin Zhao. Xin Zhao can buy a lot of space into this. And then you have the Ashe flex. So I was actually really impressed with the first three from K-Corp. I think it's really winning. I was not that happy with the Sejuani pick. I think the Sejuani pick was weird here. I wonder why Elyoya went for Sejuani in this type of situation. A lot of times when you have a Neeko mid, you'll look for AD carry junglers. So you'll look for things like Lee Sin with Neeko, or another option that Elyoya is really good at is Bel'Veth, because Neeko is pretty good at like level 6 and Azir is weak until you have Nashor's Tooth generally. What you can do is you can draft Bel'Veth, counter pick top, and then you should have like a timing to play for Void Grubs and get an early form for Elyoya, because you have stronger top, stronger mid, and you give yourself a carry threat. I think in general, I would like to see Elyoya on more carry picks with this team than things like Sejuani. Also, Sejuani doesn't pair with anything that they have right here, and it's very hard to get a winning melee support on 4 or melee top on 4. You're probably going to have to draft something that's a lot safer. I mean, you could go something like Renekton here on 4. That maybe is an option, but it's still not super good, I think. What makes Xin so strong this patch? Just Titanic Hydra, and they just changed jungle. They changed jungle so that your champion doesn't kill the camps anymore. Your pet kills the camps. And one of Zin's biggest weaknesses was clearing slow. But now every jungler kind of clears at similar speeds, so it's a huge buff to Xin. Okay, Heimer ban. So the Heimer ban is because Aphelios generally wants to pair with range supports. Like, you don't really like playing Aphelios Nautilus. Like, these types of lanes, they're playable, but they're not great. Most of the times you want to play Aphelios Renata, Aphelios Lulu, Aphelios Milio, these types of lanes that are ranged, and the enchanters can buff the Aphelios, and Aphelios with steroids is super OP. So the Heimer ban is to counteract the Ashe going AD carry and the Heimer going support, and then you just get super abused in lane because there's not much that you could pick as a support to counteract that. Like, maybe you could go something like Aphelios Senna to make the lane more playable, but then you kind of have a duo that doesn't make much sense together. Aphelios and Senna doesn't really have much teeth, so it's better to just remove the problem and ban out the Heimer. So the Milio ban just shows that they want to go Renata. I think the only reason you'd go Milio ban is if you want to go Renata or maybe Rakan. Also, I think Milio is pretty good into the champions they already have. So not only would Milio be good in the lane for K Corp, it would also be good into Nico plus Sejuani later on. So I think the Milio ban also makes sense here. Gwen ban. So when I see a Gwen ban, I don't understand it, because if you're playing Jax, you should be willing to play into the Gwen matchup, I think. And then also the other picks that I thought would be good for them would be like Renekton, for example, which is another pick that is good into Gwen, or should be good into Gwen. So you have the Renata come out on 4. Now, this is a pretty risky pick for Mad Lions. I didn't really like the Renata pick, because Renata gets countered by Ashe support, and K-Corp has the ability to flex Ashe. So you kind of played into the Ashe flex hand. It makes it a really easy flex from Ashe to go AD to support and play into Renata. What I thought the answer was going to be was, I thought that they were going to pick any type of like strong poke AD carry here. So I guess the only one is really Caitlyn. And I thought they were going to go Renekton. I think Renekton actually has a ton of value in this type of game. I think Renekton is actually really good here, because they want to go a melee top laner. The things that counter Renekton that you're afraid of are like Gnar is a counter later on. But that would make their comp super weird. If they had Gnar, Sejuani, Nico topside, it doesn't really have like much of an identity. Generally, Sejuani wants to be played with some type of carry top laner. Like, you can play it with Renekton, you can play it with Jax, you can play it with Akali, you can play it with like Camille if it's a good angle, Fiora if it's a good angle. You can play it with Aatrox even. Like, you just are normally looking for some type of melee champion that's relatively strong, that can benefit from Sejuani's E, and they can chain it together. So I thought Renekton would be the pick. Like, Caitlyn Ashe makes a lot of sense here, but Renekton I think would be really good for K-Corp, just to soft counter the picks that Merwin wants to play here. Instead, they go Jax. Jax was strange to me. Jax was really strange because it doesn't really feel like you need more damage in this comp. When you look at this team comp right here, you have Azir, Ashe, you have Azir, Caitlyn, Xin Zhao. Those are your carries. Then you have like an engage support, essentially, like a support that functions as an engage support later on, that also does more damage than general supports. You'd think that you would slot in something that is like consistent. Like, either you'd go a tank, or you'd go something that, you know, has the ability to neutralize top lane. So I was thinking maybe Aatrox here, maybe like Renekton was my favorite. Maybe you go Aatrox here, but obviously if you go Aatrox, then they can go Renekton Sejuani, which is like a little bit hard if you're not a top tier Aatrox player. I think it's actually not that bad. I think the new items benefited Aatrox a bit. That being said, I think the Jax just adds so much volatility to the game that doesn't need to be here. I think that you can make this game way less volatile and rely on the winning bot lane that you already have. You already drafted winning bot lane, and you have the strongest early jungler in the game, right? Like, 3v3 bot should be mega free for K-Corp this game. Xin, Caitlyn, Ashe into Renata, Aphilio, Sejuani. Like, this has no damage compared to what K-Corp has. And then the Akali pick comes in on 5. So I think the Akali pick kind of like gives Mad Lions like an angle to win. Because I feel like before the Akali pick, there's a very high chance that they just end up getting like stalled out and beaten down. I mean, the reason you wouldn't want to go a pure tank top is if you go something like Ornn, then if Merwin, I don't know if Merwin can play like a lot of the just standard top laner. Like, how good is this Aatrox, for example? That's what you're afraid of. You go Ornn, and then he goes Aatrox, and then it's like a really good lane for Aatrox if the Aatrox player is good. And then top lane like has, you know, the possibility to get murdered 2v2. Like, your team has Ornn, Xin Zhao early, and then 2v2 the enemy team has Jax Aatrox, or sorry, Sejuani Aatrox. So it's just like you have the ability to fight around it. Aatrox can just win those fights like almost 2v1.